It's great to see so many familiar faces around here in 2025 as well. My name is Kristina. I am the head of Global Apps Consulting team at Google Play, and once again, I'm so happy to be here in front of you and with you to share some exciting content that is coming up in the next 90 minutes. The first session that I will focus on will share some app ecosystem trends. What are some of the patterns that we see from the most successful apps on Google Play? Followed by Tammy, who is going to share some insights into successful conversion strategies for your buyers across the life cycle. And then the third talk that we have today focuses on subscribers. We'll have some pretty interesting insights about subscribers who tend to churn versus subscribers who tend to leave and churn, and subscribers who tend to continue and renew their subscription plans. So a lot of exciting content coming up. I hope you have a comfy seat, but not too comfy to pay attention. Let's kick things off. So the good news is that the apps businesses continue their growth in 2025. What we see is social-driven categories like dating, live streaming, social apps across Google Play, to very much content-focused apps, either music streaming, video streaming, live streaming, etc. They're growing between 9 to 13% year over year in their revenue. But when we look at the top 500 apps on Google Play with their top performance KPIs and numbers, it's interesting to see how the top spot in terms of revenue growth has been actually taken by feature-driven apps this time. There are many in this room as well across productivity, design, AI tools, creator tool apps that are really seeing the success and are benefiting from some of the AI-driven innovation that is happening all around us. So what is behind their success, you might ask? What we will be covering in the next half an hour is looking at 3 apps groups across the 3 key performance fundamentals. We'll be looking at apps that are really successful at engaging their users. We'll be looking at apps that are extremely good at converting these engaged users into buyers. And the third fundamental and the third group of apps are the ones that really know how to drive revenue from these buyers. And the areas that we will be covering will focus on some of the metric performance insights. So we'll share quite a bit of data about these apps groups. We'll be looking at what is behind their product value proposition. What are the drivers behind engagement, conversion, and monetization? We'll share some interesting examples from top-performing categories, and also key takeaways for you to take home. And we will be doing all that following 8 unique app attributes. What we have done for this talk is we've chosen 8 criteria that really differentiates the top performers from the rest. The first group, going clockwise, looks at the product experiences. So we'll take a look at how many of these top-performing apps have features as their core value proposition versus how many have successfully integrated any kind of social experiences into their product, like communities, chats, live streaming, or whether the most successful apps have content at their core, whether it's watching something, reading something, or listening audio. Then we'll take a look at user retention and how early retention can really boost engagement and monetization. And moving on to also monetization metrics. What is the buyer conversion trend, and how well these top-performing apps really are able to monetize these payers. And last but not least, we'll also take a look at their business models. And one key sign that we identified was whether these top-performing apps rely mostly on simple, straightforward business models like subscriptions or one-off in-app purchases, or whether they actually have invested and leveraged hybrid monetization and driving, therefore, hybrid buyer share. The last interesting angle will be how the buyers behave. We actually noticed in the data that whether users decide to make their purchase decision early on in their user journey or leave it to later into their user experience actually differs quite significantly. For this talk, we consider users who are late buyers and leave their decision really late on into their user experience, those who make their first purchase a year or more or later into their app experience. And how to read these radar charts? It's actually very easy. We'll have a lot of blue dots going around the radar, and you have to just follow the dots. The closer the dots are to the circle, the lower the performance across the attributes or KPIs, or the softer the signal. The further the dot is away from the circle, the higher the performance, or the stronger the signal across these top-performing apps. So we have a lot of interesting stuff coming up, and I see some of you already taking photos, so let's go. Let's take a look at the first group. These are the apps that are the best in engaging their users. We took the metric of active days across the monthly active users as the key criteria that really differentiates the best from the rest. And what we see is that the median app across the top 500 top-performing apps on Google Play sees that about 6% of their monthly active users come back to the app at least every other day. However, the best of the best, that we'll dive deeper shortly, sees nearly a third of their monthly active users coming to their app and doing something in their app at least every other day. Imagine that. If you have your monthly active users and a third of them comes back and does something in your app every other day, how amazing would that be? Or if your app already is as engaging as this, congratulations. So what is behind these successful engaging apps, and what kind of tactics and strategies they're using? What we see is, going again clockwise, what type of product experiences are the key drivers behind app engagement? It's not really the features or some complicated functionality. There are some apps who are applying social layers really successfully and somewhat driving engagement. But what we see from the data is that it's very often, and most of the content experience apps that are really successful at driving this frequent use. And what we have noticed that if apps layer either social or content experiences on top of any other functionality that they might have in the app, it also correlates with higher engagement. The very strong signal that we also see among these highly engaging apps is that it starts from day one. The top-performing apps in this cohort see as high as 40% next-day retention for their new users, and evolving into about 18% day 28 retention. So they really attract and get the user attention from the get-go. You might ask how they do that. We have gathered a few examples and common tactics what these highly engaged apps do. Content personalization. It's something all of us are very familiar with, and across all the content, music, or video streaming apps that we watch, it's clear that many of these apps are really good at personalizing the things we see and the things we watch, or read, or listen to. But how might you transform these experiences into your app, no matter in what categories they are? Imagine you are a creator tool app. How might you curate some design templates for some segments of your users to make sure that they are the most useful ones for your key audiences? Or if you're a social app, how might you let your users to bookmark the most interesting communities for them? Or if you're in a health and fitness app, what could be the personalized health metrics that some of your users might watch and monitor on a day-to-day basis? The second example is a trend that we are noticing both in the data and in our conversations with a lot of app developers like you more and more frequently recently. And it is about the question of how to mix long time asks from the users with short-form, bite-size content and experiences. What we see is, among the most engaging apps, finding a way to balance the attention spans that require long time slots versus short time slots is really some recurring and key tactic that most engaging apps are applying in their product. You might think, what could be the ways to engage users like that, whether these are short community updates or posts, or new snippets from your creators, or some sort of updates or interactive elements in your app that require users to just stop by and do something in your app. And think about beyond push notifications, how to really leverage these bite-sized, short attention span features that you can drive in, that you can pull in from your user base and expand them in the product more wider. There are also areas where games are really successful at driving engagement, and one of them is also combining your personal progress and community contribution investments with rewards. Games do that really well, and how might that look like for apps? Think about how you can tie your user progress or some investments into your product by contributing user-generated content or sharing something with the other users, and actually create a value exchange so that in return, these users get either some free elements in your app, some new snippets or pieces of content or features and functionality, and think about also how we can drive monetization in the long run. So we looked at some of the engagement-driving elements in these apps, but how do these apps really balance that with monetization trends? This is where the trade-offs come to play. What we see is that strong engagement does not necessarily correlate with high buyer conversion, nor high revenue from these paying users. And what we also see is that any form of more sophisticated monetization or business model is also kind of in the back seat. Many of these apps rely on simple subscription or IAP monetization. However, where the strong engagement can lead is opportunities to really leverage and convert your long tail. We see that among these top engaging apps, over 27% of the people who make the decision to purchase in the app do that a year or later into the user journey. So what are some of the key learnings from the top engaging apps on Google Play? And what are some of the tips that you can take home for your team to brainstorm and ideate? The number one thing that we see as a frequent pattern is these apps have really figured out how to get the user back into their app and enjoying something in their value proposition on a very frequent bite-sized basis. And they tend to do it from the day one. Really build up the excitement and interest in your app from the very first moment user installs your app and onboards into your user experiences. And it's not all greatness all over the place. Good engagement can come with trade-offs. So what we see is a lot of these apps in this cohort obviously have prioritized an excellent product market fit, and therefore the users might be let and allowed to take their time in terms of conversion. So really, in this scenario, think about how you can leverage and really double down on this very active user base, and think about maybe you could benefit from monetization models like in-app ads or very low barrier in-app purchases for your users. So we've gone through the top engaging apps. Let's move on to the second cohort. And these are the products and the businesses that are really the best of the best in converting their user base. So how do they do that? First, we took the metric of buyers over monthly active users, again, as the key criteria how to separate the best from the rest. And what we see is that roughly the median percentage of monthly active users who decide to pay among these apps is about 1%. So every 100th monthly active user is purchasing something in this app on a monthly basis. But again, the best performance that we will focus on are the ones whose performance is significantly higher. And these apps see at least every 10th of their active user on a monthly basis making some sort of a purchase in their app. That's pretty good, right? So let's see, what is behind and enabling this high conversion performance? Again, let's take a look at the familiar radar chart, and this time follow the medium blue dots across the charts. What we see is that the feature experiences, and compared to the social experiences, it's again the content that consistently drives conversion across these apps. We heard from the earlier keynote speech that the drama short or the short form content categories are really striving and have found their success across their user base. And I can confirm we see this trend among the Android users as well. They have really figured out how to turn this sort of short form, bite-sized, engaging streaming content, and not just to drive engagement, but also to drive the conversion for their users. I know we have a few drama short category developers in the room, so if you notice them, please grab their shoulder and ask how they're doing this. However, focus on buyer conversion does not always mean that all the other metrics are great as well. So these apps definitely maybe pay less attention to the early user attention, performance being noticeably lower than in the first engagement group. And their priority is on the buyer conversion. So what they do is they really think about how to engage the engaged users and leverage the user base and think about how to provide a consistent, sometimes even increasing value over time so that the people who use and enjoy the app continue purchasing. So what are the buyer trends that we see that despite some of the lower performing metrics in early top of the funnel still drive the buyer conversion? So it's not really the deep monetization that is happening across the apps, but these products and these experiences really leverage and have implemented a very diverse, very nuanced, and different offerings for all sorts of buyer types. They really capitalize on offering their users subscriptions, in-app purchases, or the combination of both. And therefore also see a very high share of these buyers becoming the hybrid buyers. At the same time, these relatively diverse, nuanced, and very often tailored offerings also mean that these users in these apps make their purchasing decisions quite early on. Only 18% of the first-time buyers in these apps leave their conversion decision later than a year using the app. So what are some of the tactics these top converting apps are applying from what we see? The one common denominator is that they really make the value proposition clear for their users very early on, and very often apply metered paywall to distinguish between what features are free and how many of them can users experience, and really put majority of their value proposition behind paywall. What we also see is that the highest converting apps have a really evolved and developed SKU diversification strategy. So they tend to offer a rich variety of either subscription lengths or mix the subscriptions with IAP offerings. And they're also really good at actually coming up with creative ways how to offer deals for their users. Tammy will go deeper into the next talk, how to really target your new active and returning buyers with all kind of different offerings and value propositions. But what we see is these apps are really experimenting with all kind of novel structures of offerings, whether it be reverse free trials or something more custom tailored for the user base. So things to take away from these top converting apps. All of them that are in this top 25th percentile really are great at showcasing the value very early on in the user journey. The trade-off is that focusing on conversion very often comes with slightly less impressive early retention. So if you really want to focus on these business KPIs, think about how to find the highest intent users, how to focus on that particular user segment, and even if you experience dormant installs, think about re-engagement strategies for them to be able to convert them later on. And think about SKU diversity. We really encourage everyone to explore and test, whether it's within your subscription model or a bit more expensive and diverse offering with IAPs combined. Variety is key here. So we've done a second full circle around top converting apps. And the final group of the products that we focus on is the ones that are really great at maximizing the monetization from these buyers they have. So the metric that we use to, again, differentiate the best from the rest is what is the monthly revenue from these buyers that the apps are experiencing. We see a bit narrower range between the kind of bottom and the higher end performers. The median revenue from these buyers globally from the apps is about $9. But again, the best of the best see over 3x performance from the buyers, with average revenue per paying user on a monthly basis reaching as high as $28. So what are behind some of the revenue-driving elements and the value in these products that really enable deepening the conversion? For once, it's not the content anymore, but it's actually the feature and functionality-driven apps that see success in 2025, getting their buyers to continuously spend. Social experiences are kind of secondary, not as important for revenue driving. Sometimes content still can be. Similarly to the highest converting apps, user retention also is kind of in the back seat. So we definitely see the apps really focusing on the monetization side of things rather than engagement and retention KPIs. The buyer conversion is also low. Once you have the buyers and focus on generating and maximizing revenue from them, the performance definitely lags behind. So what is behind the success in monetizing these buyers? It's obviously the high ARPU, and again, it's the hybrid monetization and hybrid buyers that are behind driving this high performance. These apps have really succeeded in figuring out how to really kind of extend and increase the ceiling of how much people can purchase in these apps. If you're a subscription app, it's kind of natural that people who subscribe kind of reach the cap pretty quickly. So these apps have really figured out how to leverage and offer additional value adds on top of the subscription business model. And again, because the users know what they're buying, they know the value proposition very early on, the apps also convert majority of their first-time buyers relatively early rather than late in the funnel. A few common tactics from these apps. What we see is the top ARPU apps are really great at showcasing what is the value of the premium product and features for these users. So they really integrate that into their onboarding flow and are highlighting the premium experience versus the rest on a consistent basis. They also highlight what the highest lifetime value driving subscription or IAP packages are, and very often actually tie some of the premium elements or extra values that you can get from the paid experiences to the highest LTV driving SKUs. And last but not least, Many of the apps are experimenting with what we call stackable IAPs, meaning thinking of ways how to continue adding value to their subscribers. I mean, in today's context, and I need to keep my AI keyword count up as well, think about ways how features that use generative AI tokens or some consumables like that, how can you come up with extra tiers or extra one-off purchases for the users to be able to buy them? Or if you're an education or health and fitness app, how could teaching or coaching sessions be sold on top of the regular subscription features? So again, a few key points to remember. The high ARPU apps really focus on narrowing and nailing down the value proposition. Very often it's tied to some sort of a goal or a benefit that the users need to reach. And they very often apply gated paywalls, meaning you can use the free experience for however long you want, but actually the most beneficial and the most effective premium features are behind the gated paywall. These apps really think through how to build experiences with a long shelf life. So in order to drive the ARPU on a monthly basis, month after month after month, it's not really about offering discounts for recurring purchases. It's much more about adding value to these users that you already have and the buyers who are already purchasing in your app. And there are always trade-offs. Very often, the high ARPU apps really experience low retention. So if you are in this group or think about optimizing that, make sure to focus on your paying users' engagement. Hemin will go deeper into how to make sure you're able to engage your users and how to do that sustainably. So we'll have more content coming about that. So we've done the 3 full circles, and now the last question is how to navigate this triangle between engagement, buyers, and revenue. So I'm going to pause here to take a photo, and we see the light, middle, and dark blue shapes. As you can see, they're actually very different. Some of you might think that they belong to the light blue group. Some of you might think that they today belong to the blue group, or their KPIs are the most similar to the middle, the highest converting apps blue group. I'm just going to do a quick sanity check and ask a question. Is there anyone in the room who thinks that their app performance metrics actually meet all the 3 groups and have reached as high as this? I don't see any hands, but hopefully these sort of performance metrics and benchmarks give some idea that if you want to focus on user engagement, the things to think through and prioritize is how can you really capture user interest early on, and how you can combine social and content experiences on top of your value proposition you already have. If you want to prioritize and really leverage converting as many these engaged buyers as you have into engaged users as you have into buyers, think about how you can diversify your business model, and also find a balance between trying to squeeze these sort of narrower and smaller buyer cohorts and think about how your value proposition can meet the wide user base that you have. And last but not least, once you have your engaged users and you're able to convert them into buyers, you want to make sure that your revenue keeps growing in a sustainable fashion. And what we really see the highest and top-performing apps doing is they know how to drive value and grow the value over time for the users. I hope this session gave you some inspiration and insights how top performance looks like across these 3 app groups and categories.